After 25 years of military service, all I wanted was peace. Not the uneasy ceasefire kind that could shatter at any moment, but true, lasting tranquility. My wife, Sarah, and I had saved every penny researched for years, and finally found it. 10 acres of rolling countryside with mature oak trees and a small creek running through the eastern edge. The property sat just outside of Millfield County, with mountains visible on clear days and enough distance between houses that neighbors were a choice, not an obligation. I remember the day we signed the papers. The realtor, a lanky man named Thomas, made a point of highlighting that our acreage sat just outside the boundary line of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. "You are completely free of HOA jurisdiction," Thomas explained, pointing to the survey map. "Their boundary ends at this creek line, 300 feet from your property edge. I made sure to confirm with county records before listing." I nodded with satisfaction. Having lived under strict base housing rules for most of my career, the freedom to build, plant, and create without permission slips and committee approvals felt like the retirement gift I had earned. Sarah squeezed my hand as we walked the perimeter that first evening as official owners. "We can finally have those solar panels you have been researching," she said, her voice light with possibility. "And I can start that chicken coop project. No one to stop us." We began renovations immediately. The house itself was solid but needed updating. The land, while beautiful, had been neglected. I cleared fallen trees, repaired the old stone wall running along the western edge, and prepared garden plots. Sarah researched heritage chicken breeds and designed a sustainable system for our future small homestead. Within weeks, our property began its transformation. 6 solar panels now crowned the southern roof face. A modest vegetable garden took shape near the kitchen window. The chicken coop, though not yet inhabited, stood ready at the edge of the clearing, painted a cheerful blue at Sarah's insistence. Most of our neighbors seemed pleasant enough. The elderly couple to the north, the Montgomerys, brought over a homemade pie and welcomed us warmly. The family with teenage boys across the road waved when driving past. But then there were the others, the ones whose properties formed part of Oak Ridge Estates, the HOA neighborhood several hundred feet beyond our boundary line. They never waved. Instead, they slowed their luxury SUVs when passing, staring with undisguised disapproval at our evolving homestead. I caught them taking photos on 2 occasions. Sarah noticed them pointing and talking while standing at the edge of their development. "Just ignore them," I told her one evening as we watched the sunset from our front porch. "We are not in their jurisdiction. They have no power here." How terribly wrong I was. The first warning notice appeared on our gate exactly 1 month after we moved in. Printed on official-looking letterhead with HOA Karen HOA, emblazoned across the top, it cited violations for unauthorized solar installation, agricultural activities in a residential zone, and unapproved exterior color choices. At the bottom, in bold red text, "Correct these violations within 7 days or face fines of $100 day per violation." I laughed and tossed the notice into the recycling bin. "They must be confused about the property lines," I told Sarah. "Not worth responding to." 3 days later, while Sarah was painting our front fence white, a silver Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt at our driveway entrance. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed with a blonde bob so perfect it barely moved in the breeze, strode directly onto our property as if she owned every inch of it. "Excuse me," she called to Sarah, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You need to stop that immediately." Sarah paused, paintbrush mid-stroke, confusion clear on her face. I am Cheryl Winters, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, the woman announced, coming to a stop mere inches from Sarah. That fence color has not been approved by the architectural committee. Sarah looked toward the house, searching for me. I was already moving, having witnessed the intrusion from the kitchen window. "Ma'am," I said calmly, stepping between them, "there must be some misunderstanding. We are not part of your HOA." Cheryl's smile never reached her eyes. "Actually, you are. All properties in this development fall under our covenants." "We are not in your development," I explained. "Our property line begins 300 feet beyond your jurisdiction." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "That is not correct, and unless you want to face fines or even arrest for code violations, I suggest you stop this unauthorized work immediately." The word arrest hung in the air between us. My military training had taught me to recognize threats, and this was most certainly one. The confrontation with Cheryl left an uncomfortable weight hanging over our property. Sarah continued painting after the woman left, but her brush strokes were tense, deliberate, her way of claiming what was rightfully ours. I spent the evening reviewing our property documents again, though I already knew what they contained. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to our mailbox. Inside was a crudely modified survey map with red marker lines drawn across our land, absorbing nearly half our acreage into what was labeled Oak Ridge Estates Phase 3 Expansion. The audacity was breathtaking. The document had no official stamps, no surveyor signature, not even a proper letterhead, just aggressive red lines and Cheryl's scrawled signature. "This is ridiculous," Sarah said, examining the paper. "They cannot just redraw property lines with a Sharpie marker." "No, they cannot," I agreed. "I am going to the county office today." The Millfield County Records Office was housed in a brick building that had likely been modern when Nixon was president. The clerk, a man with 30 years of government service etched into the lines of his face, listened patiently to my story. "Let me pull the official maps," he said, disappearing into a back room. He returned with both digital records and physical survey documents. "Here are the official boundary lines for Oak Ridge Estates and your property. There is no overlap whatsoever. You are correct. Your land begins 300 feet beyond the HOA boundary." He provided official copies with county seals and showed me how to access digital records through their portal. "If you are having boundary disputes, these are the definitive documents. No HOA can redraw county-approved property lines." Armed with official documentation, I returned home and installed clear signage at the property edge. "Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction," along with a copy of the county-certified boundary map inside a weatherproof case. Sarah took photos for our records. 3 days passed quietly, then Cheryl made her next move. The only access road to our property ran alongside the eastern edge of Oak Ridge Estates before branching toward our land. Though it was a county-maintained rural route, one Thursday morning we woke to find the road completely blocked by orange traffic cones and a handwritten sign. "Road closed, HOA maintenance, RESID and TS only." Sarah had a doctor's appointment that morning. "I will move those cones myself," she said, grabbing her car keys. I wanted to stop her. Something about this felt orchestrated, but she was already backing out of the garage. I followed in my truck, staying several hundred feet behind. When Sarah reached the blockade, she stopped and began moving cones to create a path. Almost immediately, 2 men appeared from a parked car nearby, both wearing polo shirts with Oak Ridge Estates security embroidered on the chest. "Ma'am, this road is closed for maintenance," the taller one announced. "This is a county road," Sarah replied, continuing to move cones. "You have no authority to close it." The second man, stockier with a buzz cut, stepped forward. "We have every right. This road serves the HOA community. It also serves properties beyond yours, including mine," Sarah countered. "Where is this maintenance you claim to be doing? I see no workers, no equipment." Their argument escalated, voices rising in the morning quiet. I pulled up just as Buzz Cut placed his hand on Sarah's car door. "Remove your hand from my wife's vehicle immediately," I said, stepping from my truck. The confrontation ended quickly after that. They retreated, muttering about calling authorities, but the road was clear. As we drove away, an elderly man who had been watching from his porch approached my window. "You folks better be careful," he warned, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cheryl has friends in the sheriff's office, been throwing that weight around for years." His words followed us like a shadow. That night, as Sarah and I discussed our options, I realized this was escalating beyond petty harassment. The fraudulent boundary map, the illegal road closure, the veiled threats, and now, possibly, corrupted law enforcement connections. "We need to document everything," I told Sarah. "Every interaction, every piece of paper, every encounter. If they want a war over boundaries, they have chosen the wrong opponents." Early morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains when the sound of tires on gravel jolted me awake. I moved to the window and felt my stomach tighten. A white sheriff's department cruiser sat in our driveway, light bar dormant but unmistakably official. "Stay inside," I told Sarah as I pulled on jeans and a shirt. My mind raced through possibilities. Was this what our elderly neighbor had warned about? Cheryl's connections making a move. The deputy who stepped from the vehicle appeared young, probably not more than a few years on the force. His demeanor seemed professional, almost apologetic. "Good morning, sir," he said as I approached. "Are you James Wilson?" I confirmed my identity, maintaining a calm exterior despite my internal alarms. "I am Deputy Rawlins. We received a complaint about trespassing on Oak Ridge Estates property. The complainant says you removed road barriers and accessed private HOA roads without authorization." The pieces fell into place immediately. "That would be difficult, Deputy, considering we do not live in Oak Ridge Estates. Our property is entirely separate, and the road in question is county-maintained." Confusion crossed his features. "The complaint was filed by Cheryl Winters. She indicated you were violating HOA guidelines and trespassing on association property." "I would be happy to show you our property documentation," I offered, "including county-certified maps showing boundary lines and road designations." He followed me inside, where I presented the paperwork I had obtained from the county office. He studied them carefully, his expression shifting from confusion to comprehension. "These seem to be in order, sir. It appears there has been a misunderstanding about jurisdiction." "Not a misunderstanding, Deputy. A deliberate misrepresentation. Mrs. Winters has been harassing us for weeks, claiming authority over our property despite clear boundary documentation." He nodded slowly. "I will note this in my report. If you continue having issues, please contact the department directly." After he left, Sarah and I hoped the official visit might put an end to Cheryl's campaign. We were wrong. 4 days later, Sarah was alone at home while I made a supply run to the hardware store. Her frantic call came just as I was loading lumber into my truck. "James," her voice trembled. "They are here, Cheryl and 2 board members. They brought someone in uniform. He says he is an officer and they are trying to detain me for code violations. I am hiding behind the barn." Cold fury replaced my initial panic. Stay on the phone. I am 10 minutes away. If they approach, tell them clearly you do not consent to any detention and they are trespassing on private property. I drove home faster than was wise, my phone on speaker as Sarah whispered updates. When I pulled into our driveway, the scene before me burned itself into my memory. Cheryl and two men in polo shirts stood near our barn. With them was a tall man wearing what appeared at first glance to be a police uniform, but something was off. The badge seemed wrong, the gear placement amateur. I activated the recording function on my phone before stepping from the truck. "What is happening here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Cheryl turned, momentarily startled by my arrival. "Your wife is being detained for multiple code violations. Officer Jenkins is here to process the citation." I approached the supposed officer, nodding details with each step. His badge was not county-issued. His utility belt held a flashlight and what appeared to be a toy handcuff case. His uniform patch read Oak Security rather than any official law enforcement insignia. "May I see your law enforcement credentials?" I asked him directly. The man hesitated, glancing at Cheryl. "He does not need to show you anything," she snapped. "As HOA president, I have authorized this intervention." "You have no authority here," I stated firmly, my phone continuing to record. "This is private property outside your HOA boundaries, and impersonating a police officer is a felony in this state." "I never said I was police," the man mumbled, suddenly backing away. "You attempted to detain my wife under color of authority," I responded, while wearing a uniform designed to suggest law enforcement status. That meets the legal definition of impersonation. Sarah emerged from behind the barn, joining me as we faced the intruders. The officer now looked distinctly uncomfortable. "You all need to leave our property immediately," I said, my military command voice returning naturally. "This interaction has been recorded and will be shared with the actual sheriff's department and our attorney." Cheryl's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." "No," I countered. "You have no idea who you have targeted. This ends now." As they retreated to their vehicles, Sarah gripped my hand tightly. We both knew this confrontation marked a turning point. What had begun as neighborhood harassment had crossed into potentially criminal territory. "We need to make some calls," I told her as we watched them drive away, beginning with the real sheriff's department. The footage from my phone was damning. 22 minutes and 18 seconds of clear video showing the fake officer attempting to exercise non-existent authority, Cheryl directing the entire charade, and explicit admissions that they had come to detain my wife for alleged HOA violations on property they had no jurisdiction over. After careful consideration, I uploaded the video to a private channel and shared the link in several local Facebook groups: Millfield County Residents, HOA Nightmares, and County Property Owners Alliance. I included a factual description without embellishment. The facts alone were incendiary enough. By morning, the video had been viewed over 15,000 times. Comments flooded in, many from other homeowners with their own Cheryl stories. Some from our area recognized her immediately. "She tried to find me for having the wrong mailbox. I do not even live in her HOA," wrote one commenter. "They towed my son's car from our driveway claiming it violated their no-work vehicles policy. We live 2 blocks outside their boundary," shared another. What began as a property dispute had revealed a pattern of overreach, affecting dozens of families. With the video evidence secured and publicly documented, I drove to the sheriff's department and requested to file a formal complaint. The desk sergeant's expression changed when I mentioned Cheryl's name. "You would not be the first," he admitted, directing me to a detective's office. Detective Lawson was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She watched the video twice, taking notes. "The man in the uniform," she said finally. "Did he identify himself as law enforcement?" He allowed Cheryl to introduce him as Officer Jenkins and stated he was there to process my wife for HOA violations. He wore what appears to be a security uniform modified to resemble police attire. She nodded grimly. "We know who he is, Carson Jenkins. He runs a small security company that mostly handles parking lot patrols for shopping centers. He is not certified for any form of law enforcement or even licensed for private security detention." Her fingers typed rapidly on her keyboard. "I am opening an investigation into possible charges of impersonating an officer, criminal trespass, attempted unlawful detention, and intimidation." That afternoon, I consulted with Elaine Maxwell, a civil rights attorney recommended by one of the Facebook group members. She reviewed our documentation and the video. "This is textbook harassment and abuse of perceived authority," she said. "We will file for an immediate restraining order against all parties involved and begin preparing a civil suit." 3 days after filing the restraining order request, we received news that shocked even our attorney. Cheryl had filed a police report claiming her home had been vandalized, specifically that someone had broken her front window and spray-painted HOA Tyrant on her garage door. She named us as the likely suspects. What she had not anticipated was her own home security system. When police investigated, they requested footage from her doorbell camera. The recording clearly showed Cheryl herself breaking the window with a hammer wrapped in a towel and applying the spray paint in the middle of the night. She had even worn gloves, suggesting premeditation. This desperate attempt to reframe herself as the victim backfired catastrophically. The detective called to inform us that criminal charges for filing a false police report were now being added to the investigation. "She is spiraling," Elaine observed when I shared the news. "This is actually common when people who have wielded unchecked power for years suddenly face consequences. They cannot believe the system they manipulated would ever turn against them." Local news stations picked up the story after Cheryl's arrest for the false report. A reporter from Channel 12 requested an interview. After discussing it with Sarah and our attorney, we agreed to a brief on-camera statement. "This was never about a neighborhood dispute," I explained to the cameras. "This was about a systematic abuse of power that affected many families in our community. No one should face intimidation or harassment in their own home, regardless of whether they belong to an HOA or not." The reporter asked about the fake officer incident. "That was the moment this crossed from harassment to potentially criminal behavior," I responded. "When someone attempts to detain another person without legal authority, using the appearance of law enforcement to do so, that threatens the safety and security of our entire community." As we spoke, more neighbors came forward with their own stories. The trickle became a flood, and what had begun as our private battle was transforming into a movement. With public opinion turning and legal pressure mounting, Cheryl changed tactics. The direct confrontation ceased, replaced by more insidious methods. It began with phone calls, dozens of them. Our landline would ring at odd hours. Sometimes the caller remained silent. Other times, a computerized voice would announce final notice of HOA violation before listing fabricated infractions and threatening legal action. The calls came from different numbers each time, making them impossible to block effectively. Sarah, who worked from home as a virtual assistant, found the interruptions particularly disruptive. "I cannot conduct client calls with this harassment in the background," she said after the sixth call one Tuesday morning. We installed a new phone system with advanced caller screening capabilities, but the respite was brief. 5 days later, Sarah collected our mail and found an official-looking envelope marked urgent, legal notice. Inside was an invoice from Oak Ridge Estate Legal Department claiming we owed $7,800 in accumulated HOA violations, late fees, and administrative processing charges. The document threatened property liens and wage garnishment if not paid within 14 days. Though obviously fraudulent to us, the professional formatting and official language might have intimidated someone less informed about their legal rights. Our attorney added this to our growing evidence file. "This constitutes mail fraud," Elaine explained, "since they used the Postal Service to deliver fraudulent financial demands." The situation escalated further when we discovered our roadside mailbox had been pried open. Inside, mixed with our regular mail, were several photographs, clearly taken with a telephoto lens, showing Sarah and me on various parts of our property. Some appeared to have been taken from the road, others from what must have been HOA property in the distance. The implied message was clear: we were being watched. "This crosses into criminal stalking," Detective Lawson said when we brought her the photos. "The restraining order paperwork needs to be expedited." Elaine filed emergency motions the same day. "We are requesting a temporary injunction against Cheryl Winters and the entire Oak Ridge Estates HOA board, prohibiting any contact, surveillance, or third-party communication with you or your property." The court date was set for the following week. As we prepared our testimony, another HOA board member, a man named Richard who had been present during the fake officer incident, contacted our attorney. "He wants to talk," Elaine informed us. "Says he has information about how the harassment campaign was organized." Richard met us at Elaine's office, visibly nervous. "Cheryl has gone too far," he began. "Most of us on the board just wanted a nice neighborhood. We never signed up for stalking and fake arrests." He revealed that Cheryl had been using HOA maintenance funds to finance her vendetta. The fake officer, Carson Jenkins, had been paid $300 from the Landscape Emergency Fund. The falsified surveys had been created using HOA office equipment. Even the threatening phone calls had been arranged through a service paid for with the association credit card. "She has been telling us for years that expanding HOA territory increases property values," Richard explained. "But this is not about property values anymore. This is about her control." On the morning of our court date, Cheryl failed to appear. Her attorney claimed she was suffering from an unspecified illness and requested a continuance. The judge, reviewing our evidence and the detective's supporting statement, denied the request and issued the temporary injunction immediately. "The evidence suggests an ongoing pattern of harassment and potential criminal behavior," the judge noted. "This court will not allow such actions to continue while procedural delays are sought." As we left the courthouse, Elaine received a message from Richard. More board members were breaking ranks, horrified by the criminal investigation and worried about their own liability. They had voted to suspend Cheryl from her position pending a formal association meeting. "The wall of silence is crumbling," Elaine observed. "When people realize they might face consequences for following a bully, self-preservation takes over." That evening, as Sarah and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, my phone pinged with a news alert. The county prosecutor had announced a formal investigation into the Oak Ridge Estates HOA for multiple potential violations, including fraud, misappropriation of funds, criminal harassment, and conspiracy to commit impersonation of an officer. "Did you ever imagine buying this peaceful piece of land would lead to all this?" Sarah asked, her hand finding mine in the fading light. "Never," I admitted, "but sometimes peace must be defended, and sometimes justice requires standing your ground." The county investigation moved with unexpected efficiency. 2 days after the prosecutor's announcement, 3 investigators arrived at the Oak Ridge Estates Community Center with search warrants for all HOA financial records, meeting minutes, and electronic communications. The community newsletter, normally filled with reminders about lawn height requirements and approved exterior paint colors, was replaced by an urgent notice from the remaining board members. It assured residents that they were fully cooperating with authorities and that regular HOA services will continue uninterrupted. Richard, who had become our inside source, told us the reality was far less orderly. "They seized computers, filing cabinets, everything," he reported. "The investigators were particularly interested in the financial records from the past 3 years. Those records, as we would soon learn, contained damning evidence beyond even our suspicions. Cheryl had not merely misused funds for her campaign against us. She had been systematically diverting HOA fees into unauthorized accounts for years. Landscaping contracts had been awarded to her brother-in-law's company at inflated prices. Security services had been billed at 3 times market rate and provided by companies that kickbacked portions to her personally. The investigation expanded rapidly. County financial crimes investigators joined the case. State-level authorities were consulted regarding the pattern of fraud. What had begun as our personal fight against harassment was unraveling an entire criminal enterprise disguised as neighborhood governance. 8 days into the investigation, at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, Cheryl Winters was arrested at her home. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit impersonation of law enforcement, harassment, stalking, mail fraud, wire fraud, financial exploitation, misappropriation of HOA funds, and filing false police reports. Local news cameras captured her being escorted to a police cruiser, her perfect blonde bob now disheveled, her expression a mix of disbelief and fury. She saw the cameras and immediately began playing to them. "This is a conspiracy," she shouted. "These people have destroyed our property values. They are the criminals." Her performance fell flat as reporters had already been briefed on the evidence against her. The evening news led with her arrest, but also featured interviews with former board members now rushing to distance themselves. "I had no knowledge of any financial irregularities," insisted the HOA treasurer, a claim belied by his signature on dozens of suspicious transactions. "Cheryl made all the decisions," claimed another board member who had personally participated in the fake officer incident at our property. Their desperate attempts at self-preservation might have been amusing if the situation were not so serious. These were people who had willingly participated in terrorizing not just us, but many families in and around their development. Detective Lawson called us the day after Cheryl's arrest. "The sheriff wants to issue a clarifying statement regarding HOA jurisdiction and authority," she explained. "Would you be willing to be part of a community meeting about this issue?" We agreed. 3 days later, at the county courthouse meeting room, the sheriff himself addressed a gathering of over 100 local residents. "Let me be absolutely clear," he began, his voice carrying authority earned through decades of service. Homeowners associations are private entities with limited contractual powers. They are not law enforcement. They cannot detain individuals. They cannot trespass on properties outside their boundaries, and they certainly cannot impersonate or claim to employ law enforcement officers. He continued, outlining the specific boundaries of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA and confirming that many properties, including ours, had been wrongfully targeted despite being outside their jurisdiction. As the meeting concluded, something unexpected happened. A man in his 60s approached us, HOA board member pin still attached to his polo shirt. He unpinned it deliberately, dropping it into his pocket. "I am removing our HOA sign from my lawn when I get home," he announced. "What has happened here is a disgrace to the concept of community." He was not alone. Over the next week, HOA signs began disappearing from lawns throughout Oak Ridge Estates. Not everyone. Some residents still believed in the value of their association, but enough to send a clear message. The era of unchecked HOA power in our county was ending. The prosecutor called to inform us that Cheryl had been denied bail due to evidence she had been planning to leave the state. Multiple board members were now cooperating with authorities, trading information for leniency. "Your stand against this did not just protect your property," he told us. "It has exposed systemic abuse that affected dozens of families. That takes courage." I thought about his words that evening as Sarah and I walked our property line, enjoying the simple pleasure of ownership without fear of harassment for the first time in months. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers along our creek and birds returning to nest in our oaks. 4 months had passed since Cheryl's arrest. The legal proceedings continued their slow, methodical progress through the system, but our daily life had returned to something resembling normalcy. I stood at the edge of our property, surveying the half-finished fence line. The white paint Sarah had been applying when Cheryl first confronted us had never been completed. Weather and neglect had left it spotted and peeling in places. "Time to finish what we started," I told Sarah over breakfast. "I am rebuilding the entire fence today." She smiled, understanding the significance beyond the practical need. "I will help. We can make it better than before." We worked through the morning, removing damaged sections, replacing rotted posts, and reinforcing the structure. Neighbors drove past, several stopping to offer help or simply to chat. The Montgomerys brought cold lemonade. A family we had never formally met introduced themselves and their children. This was what we had envisioned when purchasing our land, a community based on respect and goodwill, not control and fear. By mid-afternoon, the local news van pulled up near our driveway. The reporter who had covered Cheryl's arrest approached cautiously, respecting our property line. "Mr. Wilson, I was hopping for a brief follow-up interview about the HOA investigation. The County Council is considering new regulations for homeowners associations as a result of your case." I placed my hammer on a fence post and nodded. Sarah joined me as the camera operator set up. "The County Council has proposed an HOA Transparency Act that would require associations to clearly mark their boundaries, undergo financial audits, and create an appeals process for enforcement actions," the reporter explained. "They are calling it the Wilson Rule unofficially." Any comment? I considered my words carefully. Homeowners associations can serve a legitimate purpose when they operate with transparency and genuine community input. The problem arises when they become vehicles for control rather than community. If our experience leads to greater accountability and clearer boundaries, both literal and figurative, then some good has come from this difficult time. After the interview, we returned to our fence project. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across our land, Richard appeared at our driveway. He no longer wore his HOA pin or polo shirt. "I wanted you to know," he began awkwardly. "The remaining board members voted to drop all claims against properties outside our actual boundaries. We are having new survey markers installed next week to clarify the lines." "That is a positive step," I acknowledged. "Also," he continued, "many of us want to apologize. We allowed ourselves to be led into actions that harmed good people. That is not who we wanted to be as neighbors." His sincerity seemed genuine. After he left, Sarah and I finished the last section of fence as twilight deepened around us. In the months that followed, our story became something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles nationwide. I created a simple website documenting our experience and offering resources for others facing similar situations. Hundreds of emails arrived from homeowners across the country sharing their stories and asking for advice. Cheryl eventually accepted a plea agreement rather than face trial. The terms included restitution to the HOA for misappropriated funds, community service, and a prohibition from serving in any HOA leadership capacity for life. Several board members received probation and similar restrictions. The Wilson Rule passed unanimously in the County Council, establishing new transparency requirements and clear jurisdiction boundaries for all homeowners associations in the county. Similar measures were being considered in neighboring counties. 1 year to the day after Cheryl first trespassed on our property, Sarah and I hosted a neighborhood potluck. People came from both within and outside the Oak Ridge Estate's boundaries. Children played together on our wide lawn. Adults shared food and conversation without division or suspicion. As evening fell, I found myself standing at the property line, looking at our rebuilt fence, strong, well-maintained, and marking a clear but welcoming boundary. Sarah joined me, slipping her hand into mine. "We fought for more than just our land," she observed quietly. "Yes," I agreed, watching our neighbors laughing and talking across what had once been battle lines. "We fought for the right to define home on our own terms, and in the end, we built something better than just a fence." The setting sun painted our land in gold and long shadows. Not the uneasy shadows of watching our backs, but the peaceful transition from day to evening on property that was unquestionably, permanently ours.